Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I sat down with Gabby from Inside the U to talk Miami recruiting, Miami in the portal, what they're going to do at quarterback. And I want you guys to check that out. But quick disclaimer, we recorded this prior to Miami's bowl game against Iowa State. So when he makes some comments on Emory Williams and when he talks about some confidence within the program about Emory Williams, that was certainly recorded before the bowl game happened. And I know fans are going to say, oh, no, didn't you see him play? Gabby, what do you mean they might start him? Again, that was prior to Saturday's bowl game. So don't yell at Gabby. Don't jump in the comments mad about anything that's said. This was the sentiment prior to that bowl game. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. Gabby from Inside the U, the Canes 247 site. Going to talk a little bit of transfer portal, a little bit of recruiting. Gabby, the big question I think everybody wants to know is Miami's quarterback for the 2025 season on the roster right now?
I think that there's a good chance that he is. Emory Williams is, Cam Ward's backup, of course. Everyone wants to know who Miami's quarterback is going to be in 2025. And look, it's no secret at this point that Miami kind of went all in on John Mateer, the former Washington State quarterback who has since transferred to Oklahoma. That was definitely the name at the top of the list. And, certainly kicked the tires on, maybe a couple other guys, but I don't think that they ever kind of really pushed all their chips to the middle of the table the way they did with Mateer. So I think Miami's kind of in limbo right now. And look, I think that there's plenty of people, in the building who are fans of Emory Williams who believe that he can be, the next quarterback of Miami as long as you kind of surround him with the right weapons. And so, I definitely think Miami's putting in, trying to get the pieces around him to kind of do that. They went out and got LSU transfer CJ Daniels, who was a 1,000-yard receiver at Liberty before he made the move to LSU. I think he was a little banged up, slightly banged up, during his time in Baton Rouge, and was still a veteran, pass catcher with over 2,000 career yards, 21 touchdowns. And, so we'll see, man. I think, we'll see maybe how all these playoff games kind of play out. Again, I think there's obviously been rumblings about, what Quinn Ewers is going to do, next year as far as if he's going to come back to college football and, maybe transfer in 2025, or is he going to kind of, follow through with the NFL? I think if either one or both of those names were to decide to come back to college and maybe test the market, I think, those would be two more options that Miami would have the opportunity to explore.
Do you, talking about recruiting, and then we'll talk about the portal, we didn't see that traditional Mario Cristobal close. Now, Miami's class is still really good. There's a lot of talent there. What do you factor? Like, obviously there's probably a lot of things, but did kind of down the stretch play, maybe hamper them? Was it NIL? Was it just, they're confident in the class they have, or just thoughts on, this Mario seems like he's out recruited his record the years that he's been at Miami. And then this year, maybe underwhelmed a little bit. I don't think that's cause for concern from big picture, but just thoughts around that.
Yeah, I definitely think, there was, again, some, I think, disappointment, a disappointment factor. And look, I think the standard that is set by Miami, not by people like me, is that Miami's going to sign top 10, top 5 classes, right? Like, I think that that's just the goal. They had accomplished that, in his first 2 recruiting cycles. And then again, off of the, best season that they've had at this point, I think they signed the number 14 class. And, to your point, TJ, they still signed the number 1 ranked class in the ACC, but I also think it's pretty telling that the number 1 class in the ACC ranked 14th, right? So I think that tells you just where a lot of the talent's filtering into, right? The SEC and the Big Ten, with Notre Dame as kind of like the lone, the exception, that's kind of in that top really 13 programs that are kind of in the mix there. So I definitely think, with RevShare, I don't think it's an advantage to have, just a lot of money, because I think everyone has a lot of money to kind of play with now. So I think that, from an NIL standpoint, I think things have certainly leveled off. Not to say that Miami isn't in a good situation, because they absolutely are. The thing is that now everyone has, a little bit of extra stuff to kind of play with as well. We're seeing that with the transfer portal with, schools like Texas Tech that are doing really good things. And, again, the way that other people are closing. So I think that the rev share has something to do with it. I also think there's something to just being able to kind of close properly in the summer months. I think more often than not, those summer commitments are going to stick. And I think Miami kind of missed on some of their top targets. And in some ways, they were kind of still recruiting off of a 7-win team, right? Because the majority of your class, again, at most programs, 90%, 95% of Miami's class was kind of locked in by, August 1st, right? A couple guys flipped and, decommitted in some natural attrition. But for the most part, all those guys stay in. So I think Miami just needs to do a better job of closing in the summer, getting the guys on board. And again, I think hopefully after this, season that they've kind of proved it on paper, when they're going into these summer months of official visits, I think maybe they'll have a better chance at maybe closing in on some of the top guys with more perspective of where the program's going at that point in time. I think they found it more difficult to flip guys this year than maybe other years. And again, I think that's just because everyone's kind of button themselves up as far, from a resources and NIL standpoint. And I think all these guys have kind of figured it out. So I think that's maybe something to attribute it to. And again, I think really the conference thing, I think I think it matters more than ever, man. I think that these kids are seeing that, like, the SEC and the Big Ten are kind of just pulling away. And I think that's being reflected in the recruiting rankings. It's being reflected kind of in the transfer rankings. I think that's just where the top talent's going right now. And I think, that's definitely something that gets, negatively recruited against. I'm sure Florida State, deals with some of that stuff too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the list in front of me, and I know it was a competitor's website, but I saw a list the other day that the top 10 players, and I'm sure that's pretty similar for 24/7.
Right.
The top 10 players in the state of Florida all went to the SEC, right? Yeah. And maybe that's slightly different for a different, maybe Rivals or 247 have a slightly
right. But still, it tells us it's a pretty telling story. Yeah, sure. No, I mean, it's definitely on track.
Yeah, and so that's something that, that's why schools in this conference want to get out, right? Like,
right.
There's a reason that, a couple are fighting pretty loud publicly, and I think others have their weapons ready for when the fight actually goes down. So you mentioned CJ Daniels as a Liberty alum. I think all three schools wanted him at times over these last couple of years. Right. Really talented, and obviously you're going to need to replace some talent at wide receiver. How good of a job do you think they've done at backfilling some of the talent that's going to be gone this year, and how good of a job do you think they've done in the portal? And then, part two of that, what do you think about what they'll try and continue to land in the portal this cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I like what they've done in the portal, right? Like, again, you kind of get your Isaiah Horton replacement. He's a guy that left to Alabama. CJ Daniels kind of fills in that role, right? So you kind of just get that back as far as just you're talking production and all that stuff. I mean, I think, you feel better about losing a guy like Isaiah Horton when you add a guy like CJ Daniels. And then I love what they've done on the defensive side of the ball. They know where their weakness is. It was clear as day to anyone who watched Miami football that secondary was just not good enough. They go out and get, right at this point, they have three blue chip guys in the secondary who they've added. Zechariah Poyser, who's the number 2 safety in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings. He was from Jacksonville State. And, he's at Miami now. He picked Miami over Florida, LSU, Georgia, and I think Auburn. So, they won a big time transfer recruitment there. They get Charles Brantley, who was originally from Venice, played, 4 years at Michigan State, and was one of the best cover corners in the country in 2024 before he kind of got a leg injury that, pushed him out at the back end of the season. But he's been excellent for the Spartans over the past few years. They address a need there. They go out and get Emmanuel Carnley, I think he's number 6 ranked corner in the 24/7 Sports rankings. He's a big 6'3", 385-pounder who's long, who played a lot of games at Arizona this past fall. And, Matt Zenitz, our national reporter, said that a lot of people in his circle, actually, if you're in like an NFL circles, feel like Emmanuel Carnley outplayed Tacario Davis, who's, again, he's in another corner in the transfer portal who has some NFL buzz around him. And, so Miami's getting another young, promising corner with plenty of years of eligibility to kind of, help out in the secondary as well. And they're looking to add some more to the secondary. They definitely want to add some more corners, potentially another safety. And then, in the trenches, they go out and get one of the top interior defensive linemen in David Clay, who was a first-team all-conference defensive tackle at Louisiana Tech. He commits to Miami. He transfers to Miami after checking out, schools like Penn State and Illinois and South Carolina, Oklahoma. I believe USC was in the mix as well. So Miami's done a good job of getting some difference-making talent on defense. They're definitely looking to address some of those clear deficiencies in the secondary. And I think that they've done a really good job so far of addressing those needs. So I like what they've done so far. And again, I think there's still plenty of work for them to be done.
Do you? I think anyone who's played Miami over the last several years is probably happy that Xavier Restrepo will not be lacing them up anymore, as he has torched everyone for the last several years. Right. Do you have anybody that you feel like fills in that role, either on the roster or is that something they'll try and address in the portal as well?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something they'll try to address in the portal. Like, I think Casey Concepcion, the NC State transfer, he was a freshman All-American. Kind of saw that the production dip down a little bit in 2024, but a super talented guy. He's someone that Miami's still chasing in the slot. So I think that he's a candidate to potentially replace Xavier Restrepo if they're able to kind of get him on board. But if not, they got guys like Nathaniel Joseph, who was a highly rated recruit who will kind of, get an opportunity around the same time that, Xavier Restrepo got his opportunity to kind of, come up and start being a productive player. And then also Nye Carr, who's he was a highly ranked true freshman that's on the roster now, who I think is going to get plenty of burn on Saturday, with Miami playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against Iowa State. So I think it'll kind of be a sort of a showcase for both Nathaniel Joseph and Nye Carr to see who could potentially, take early reins of that slot job. And if Miami decides that they want to, again, go into the transfer portal and continue to pursue Casey Concepcion, who, appears to be just dragging out his transfer recruitment into, the new year, and, to potentially check out like North Carolina, maybe some others. So some potential answers in the transfer portal, some potential answers on the roster. We'll see where the chips ultimately fall at the end of the day.
I know you're covering visits, offers, commitments, decommitments, everything. Guys, enter the portal. All of those things concerning Miami football right now. Where can people find that, and where can they follow you?
Yeah, you can find my work, at InsideTheU.com, on the 24/7 Sports Network, or on Twitter at GabbyUrrutia247. Just wall-to-wall Miami Hurricanes recruiting coverage.
Awesome, man. We appreciate you for taking some time and chatting with us, buddy.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.